I want to introduce everybody to my good friend Tom Handler. Tom basically pretty much single-handedly has taught me the family office part of the business, and I have really nothing to add at this point. I'm just going to introduce Tom Handler.
You're very kind. Well, Jim, since you've heard some of this, if I don't make a point or don't clarify it, please help me out.
100%.
And make sure that
100%.
I'm not leaving anyone behind. It's really kind of an exciting time in working with these family offices for a couple of reasons. I mentioned that real estate was picked as the top investment last year. It's picked as the top investment this year. And it's not just domestic family offices. There are massive indications from Asia, South America in particular, and then Europe maybe in third place, that money's coming here chasing as well. The economist who led off indicated in his slide the amount of foreign money that's moving in here, and that's exactly the case. And a lot of those are huge family offices. So when you get to Asia and South America, they're pretty far behind us in the industry. So if you look at it globally, the U.S. is definitely leading the charge in the family office market. Europe is second. It kind of falls off behind that. And South America is close to dead last with only Africa behind it. But the families coming out of Asia and South America in particular tend to be a lot larger. They have a much more barbell-shaped economic distribution. So you have these massive multi-billionaire families and destitute people, and the middle class is building up in places like Brazil and dissipating in the communist countries like Venezuela. And so there's tremendous opportunities with this foreign capital coming into the States. One of the keys in determining how to work with the family will be in part what their setup or structure is. So this makes a difference. So I'll go through this really quickly. I suspect most of you know this, but just in case. The family office is basically a business enterprise that will run the affairs of a family. And 25 years ago, I would be at conferences with over 1,000 people, and I would ask, how many have ever heard of a family office? And there'd be maybe 15 hands go up, right? So this is absolutely a nascent industry. I was very lucky. I was a young guy, got hired, went through a beauty pageant with 15 law firms, ended up getting hired by this $5 billion Japanese family, and it was way over my head at the time. And I learned the entire market off of that family. Then in 1989 in Chicago, the private client group at Harris Bank, which is a very prominent Chicago family, that group really founded the family office industry in the United States. So the first association was Family Office Exchange out of Chicago, followed by Family Wealth Alliance that spun out of Family Office Exchange out of Chicago. All those people came out of Harris Bank. The two top recruiters in the industry came out of Harris Private Bank. And most of the CEOs and CFOs of the big Midwest families came out of that Harris Private Bank. So the associations then began to collect data, do research, and actually form an industry. There was little research, very few publications. All the publications dealt with the soft side, how not to ruin the kids, psychology, therapy, that sort of thing. It didn't talk about what do you do from a risk management, finance, education, legal structure, asset protection, premarital plan. It didn't really talk about or investment. It didn't talk about those hard issues at all. So here we are all these years later, but again, the industry started in '89. So now we have 5 associations in the U.S. So after Fox and Family Wealth Alliance, you had IPI, which is New York and San Francisco, and then you had Family Office Association formed out in Greenwich about 5-6 years ago, and then 2.5-3 years ago, Family Office Group, which is now Family Office Club, same group, is run by Richard Wilson, who's got the LinkedIn Family Office site. Right? So you now have 5 U.S. associations. You also have an association in Singapore. You have an emerging association in Beijing and an association forming in Brazil. So this entity is beginning to pick up some steam, and it basically serves as the quarterback to run the affairs of the family. And whether it does it internally or it outsources or some combination of insourcing and outsourcing, that's sort of the nature of the business. And I'll go through this fairly quickly. Once you know that you're dealing with a family office, there's 3 basic kinds of family office. The single family office is the traditional office. And when I talk about this, they serve the affairs of one family. Now, in some cases, one family for one of our families is 163 people. One family for one of the famous window families is 890 some odd people. Right? So it's still the same family. They're all related. And they qualify under Dodd-Frank for for the various securities and CFTC exemptions because it's all the same family. The minute you add a second family, now you're a multifamily office. In fact, most of the multifamily offices are bigger than that, but they range from 2 families up to several hundred families. And then finally, the virtual family office tends to be at the smaller end of the range, but not necessarily. The virtual family office is where you have the legal structure, and you may have no or 1 or 2 employees. It's really the family running it, and everything is outsourced. So in terms of a size range, this is fairly critical. The single family office tends to start at $250 million of net worth and goes up to, the sky's the limit, the richest people in the world, 30, 40, 50 billion, depending on whose numbers you actually believe. The multifamily office tends to start at $1 billion plus, so that's typically the beginning before it can even get rolling. And then the virtual family office is really anywhere from 50 billion to over $1 billion. I know billion-dollar family offices that literally have 2 employees and everything is outsourced. That was a decision made by the family. The ranges tend to vary, but the virtual family office could be cost-effective at even a $10 million level, meaning that the benefits that you pick up from an income tax and estate tax standpoint pay for the enterprise. It's a very easy no-brainer, and you get the asset protection, premarital planning, better management structure, control, governance, succession, free, basically as a throw-in. So virtual family offices are proliferating greatly, particularly in the U.S. Single-family offices are rather stagnant in the U.S. because there's a lot of consolidation, or they've had to become multifamily offices because of these rules, and wealth creation is nowhere near what it was pre-meltdown, right? So when that comes back, that'll change again. In the rest of the world, single-family offices are exploding, particularly China and South America, exploding, just all over the place. The virtual family office starts at a fairly low amount, can go quite a bit higher, and what's happening among all these is that both the single-family office and the virtual family office are often outsourcing to the multifamily office. So let's say a multifamily office could offer 30-some-odd different services. What is a multifamily office? Well, the industry hasn't really refined a definition, but the leading research on multifamily offices is done by Family Wealth Alliance out of Chicago, and they do studies and publish the research. And multifamily offices, there were 30, 20 years ago, and now there's about 140. And they begin to define what they are, and it basically says if they aren't providing 12 to 15 of these services, they're not a real multifamily office. So an investment shop that does nothing but investment and calls himself a multifamily office is smart because that's a good marketing tag, but they're not really a multifamily office. By being a multifamily office means they're involved in other activities, the tax planning, the risk management, not just the investments. So those people that are calling themselves multifamily offices but are really just doing investments, those are really outsourced CIOs, and that industry is growing as well. But the most resonant source of capital, the biggest magnet in the industry in the last 20 years, each year, multifamily offices have outperformed banks, wirehouses, trust companies, and the giant broker-dealers in attracting capital. It is the most resonant single source for capital. 2 reasons. Number 1, people have figured out globally that a family office is the single best way to ensure long-term wealth management. That's just a fact. And then secondly, when you have a family office, they're your advocate. It's much like having an attorney that doesn't do investments or take fees from anybody else. You have an advocate on your side that's unconflicted and is only in the same place you are and only takes money from you. So people like the idea of knowing full transparency, complete open architecture, and pursuing best in class. And that's sort of the family office mantra. If you're not best in class at something, they really don't want to talk to you. You better be in the top of the pile to get in the door and have something good to offer them because they can go pretty much anywhere. The benefit of the multifamily office, of course, is that once you get in with a multifamily office, you won't get all their business, but once they know you, it just is manna that keeps on coming. They just keep referring and sending you people over time because you meet their parameters. So instead of dealing with a dozen families, most of these multifamily offices will invest as a fund and come at you with a fund portfolio. So you're dealing with one party. You don't have to deal with all these individual families. They've already checked them all. They're all accredited. They've done the securities compliance. So it's a very, very easy formula. And we've made the multifamily offices part of our distribution network. Once they know who you are and what you can do, we're not going to get all their clients, but we're going to get our fair share. And they just keep on sending them, which is just a great spot to be in. This chart details the whole list of services that you can provide, including full concierge, yacht management, vacation home management, on and on and on and on. They can do everything, and some do everything. In most cases, they don't. There are certain things they're just not going to take on. They'll outsource those to other concierge services or experts. There's a service that does nothing but back-end accounting, bill paying. They'll collect all the bills from your 5 homes and 2 businesses and pay them. They'll open all your mail at all your houses, and do very basic backroom stuff. So they've gotten very specialized in terms of what they do. Others will get you tickets in front of the New York Philharmonic on Christmas Day in the front row, that kind of thing. So it's a pretty wide array, but the vast majority is focused on financial matters. It's really about wealth management over the long haul. In terms of what they come in and do, the SFOs, they'll come into specific projects, one-on-one, they'll come into funds. The investment party will be either a family holding company, most likely, FLL, family limited liability companies, family limited partnerships, and series family limited liability companies. And the multifamily offices tend to come in as a fund. They often create the fund and bring one investor to you that's already set up and accredited in a good position. And by the way, any questions along the way, feel free to interrupt. I'm delighted to, I'm not going to lose my train of thought, I promise. So we'll get through this. This is one of the keys that I think that people not in the industry don't understand, and that is, who do you need to get to? Who are you actually dealing with? And it depends on the office. As you can see, there's a wide spectrum of who the decision maker might be. And you need to figure that out early in the going, or you can spin your wheels for a long time in dealing with these potential partners, investors, or funders, as the case may be. And getting to that person matters. So in a single-family office, it might be that the investment committee reports to the CFO or CIO, and they make the decisions. It could be the CFO or CIO do it on their own. It could be a fund manager in that family holding company. It could be a trustee of a trust, or the current trend and more sophisticated trusts have a directed investment advisor that makes a decision. The trustee is purely an administrative, custodial, or asset protection trustee. In the multifamily office, a little bit easier. You'll have an investment officer or committee or a fund manager, and you'll meet them out of the box. So they're pretty easy to figure out. And the virtual family offices is the biggest array of potential decision makers. It could be anybody. CEO, CFO, CIO, investment committee, trustee, trust investment advisor, or a family member. So you need to figure out who in the going to deal with, or you're going to squander some time. Now, in terms of the structures, you kind of need to know what you're dealing with. So at its simplest level, this is the current best-in-class U.S. structure for wealth management. What this is comprised of is the entity on top, the burgundy box. That's a virtual family office or single family office, as the case may be. Think of it in your old syndication days. This is the general partner running your fund, or it's the managing member running your LLC fund. Same exact role. So this is the investment advisor, this is the quarterback, this entity's running a show. It's a legal entity. It's almost always a C Corp, an S Corp, or an LLC, right? It's going to be one of those. And it is run by the family. The family members comprise that board and run the show, and that's where they hire people and pay for things. That entity then will have down below it family holding companies, just like a private equity fund manager, fund structure, hedge fund, fund manager, fund structure. So that FLLC, in this case, is the holding company. That enterprise will have a carried interest going to the managing member. So the managing member, just like the old GP days where you had to have at least 1% to be respected for tax purposes, that was my favorite tax opinion. No risk whatsoever, 50 pages, huge fee. It was a great world back those days. Same idea, except that the managing member here will have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5% interest typically, and I've seen as high as 20. Depends what the family office is doing. The more activities it's involved in, the more it does, the more you can justify. That carry is the key to picking up huge income tax benefits that pay for the entire structure from the get-go, as well as giving control. So it makes it comfortable for the older generations to transfer money to G2, G3, and G4 because I still control it. I can pay myself a salary out of it. I can self-deal. I can co-invest. I can pay myself loans. In fact, if I decide my children are never going to get that money, they will never get that money. Not in my lifetime and not in their lifetime. It's just going to go to my grandkids if they rub me the wrong way, which, of course, they're not going to do. So by having this control mechanism, I was very willing to transfer a much bigger part of my estate than I ever would have because I explained to the kids, you have all this stuff, and there's a lot of numbers here, but really, you don't vote it, you don't control it, you can't pledge it. It's non-marital property. Your prenup blows up, it's still going to go to my grandkids. So it's a very well-isolated basket of assets. And the benefits here are just numerous. This structure knocks off 6 or 7 things with the same stones, with the same birds with the same stone, rather. And so this enterprise is compelling. If you don't have this, and you have more than $2 million in assets, you need to go chat with your lawyer and accountant. At $10 million, this becomes compelling. If you're at $10 million, you don't have this, everyone's asleep at the switch, and this is not a close call. And as the numbers go up, you'll go from liking me to buying me a car, and at $100 million, you're going to name your children after me. That's how compelling these structures are. And I'm not exaggerating even a hair. This is not well understood by the legal and accounting marketplace, only in segments. So like there's one accounting firm in Atlanta that gets it. There's 2 accounting firms in Chicago that get it. Selected law firms around the country. But to put this all together, it's incredibly complicated. So if you don't have lawyers in a room that are multi-entity business planners, tax lawyers, asset protection lawyers, securities lawyers, you put them all together, you could never figure this out. And they haven't. So we've been doing this for over 20 years. And I can tell you with great security, 90% of the biggest law firms in the world have no idea what any of this is. They just don't understand it. They can't put it together, and they can't get there, which is why my little law firm, I'll boast on my brilliant partners.
I'll say it. I lost a piece of paper, but weren't you the top guy voted for asset protection in the world with 32,000 votes cast?
Some would say. But more importantly, the firm has won 23 awards in the last 4 years. And this year's not over. We just won another one, which is Best Tax Law Firm in the United States. We won the big one, which is Best Overall Law Firm. I have 20 lawyers, right?
Anybody else won that twice?
It's about the, no. Actually, no one else. We're the only firm to have won it twice. But it's because of the protocol. Unlike the law firms and accounting firms are so siloed, the more you collaborate, the more money you give up. So I started out doing partnership taxes. I did several of the largest law firms in Chicago, including the firm I thought I'd always go to. My uncle was a partner there for 40 years. And I saw how it works. And I'm like, I'm not doing that. So let's see, in 6 months, I billed the most of the associates. I wrote an article. I had the highest billing. And I wrote a paper on how they could change their computer system and save a lot of money and pay me more. And my 6-month review, they said, well, you know, you're going to go for 40 was top dollar when I got out. So I thought that was just massive money. So they said, next year you're going to go to 42.2, then you go to 43.7, then you're going to go to 44.9. And they're like, so let me see. I brought in the most business. I billed the most hours. I just published an article. I wrote this white paper on the computer system. And my bonus is non-existent, and my raise is going to be the same as every other guy in my class. That's virtually every big firm, right? Then you become an income partner, kind of goes the same way. But it's even worse. If I bring in the business and I'm capable of doing it, I'm doing it all. I'm going to use my junior partner, my senior associate, my junior associate, my paralegal, my legal assistant. Because if I do that, at the end of the year, it's a $100,000 project, I'm going to get $80,000 out of it by doing it in my little silo. If I bring in the multi-entity business planner, I bring in the IP lawyer, I bring in the asset protection lawyer, and we collaborate, at the end of the year, I get 15 to 20 cents on the dollar. Who's going to do that in a good market? Not many. Who's going to do that in a bad market? Absolutely nobody. And to give you a sense of how endemic this violent internal conflict of interest is, at Arthur Andersen, before it blew up, top tax accounting firm in the world, in my opinion, by a significant measure. And most of those guys are now at Deloitte, Chicago. I asked the family office group there, which was comprised of 5 lawyers, 2 of whom were my law school classmates. Those 2 guys were CPA, MBA, Masters in Tax. The other guy was CPA, MBA, Masters in Tax with a PhD. Didn't know when to stop going to school. And I asked them, how much of your business do you get from the rest of Arthur Andersen? This is the global family office experts in the global firm. You wouldn't believe the number. 4%. Which means they drummed up all their own business. None of the other partners would send them business, even though these were the experts. So when I say these internal conflicts of interest are massive, you don't even get the best the law firm has to offer, much less if the best guy's in another city. So if I were in a typical firm and I bring in the guy from New York because he's better, not only do I lose all that money, I fly him in first class, he stays the 4 seasons, and he's going to wine and dine himself on my dime. I'm paying for all that too. How often do you think that's going to happen? So we had to kill all those structures. We put in more of a Bain BCG type model. Rolling is not eat what you kill. But without that collaboration, you're never going to develop these high-end results. And the second flaw is most of the people doing this stuff don't have good quantitative backgrounds. You'd be shocked at how many corporate attorneys were history and poli-sci majors. You know, to be a tax lawyer without an accounting background, I don't understand it. I don't know how good you think you can possibly be. And when it comes to the trust and estate attorneys, I've been on all these committees, you know, National Bar, various states, Chicago, Illinois. I don't think 10% of my colleagues could fill out a 1040A. just not what they do. And so they're not going to spot the opportunity. They're not attuned to these issues. So the structure is developed from that, and then this entity dumps into all the trusts. And that's becoming critically important because of the privacy and security issues that the web is causing. So what's happening is threats are inordinately going at these people because they can be found now, right? So if an asset goes through probate, which a trust will not do, anything goes through probate, let's say you put everything in your trust, but not your personal property, and they see you've got a $75,000 Persian rug and you've got a Maserati and a $5 million Picasso, that's going to be public record. Anything that goes through probate is either at the county seat, the city hall, or in some jurisdictions on the web. So every state, every county, every country has rules of what happens in probate, and it's there for the public to see. Not only do they see what you had, so even if they don't have any of your financial assets or businesses, they can see that you own this stuff. I think your children and grandchildren are at risk because they know who they are, where they live, and what they got. So you're going to be subject to just as what's happened to our clients in the last 18 months. Death threats, hostage and kidnap, cyber theft, cyber hacking, social security theft, identity theft, just in the last 18 months. CEO of a major company, death threats. Very scary out there. So this security issue is a big, big deal. And of course, you'll save yourself 30 to 40% of the legal fee in the estate administration. A little bit more sophisticated version of the same thing. What happens at about 35 million, these holding companies tend to grow. There tend to be three. One might be primarily for the oldest generation, for the patriarch and matriarch. They don't really plan to give that away. That's what they're going to live on until they die, until they're like 95. Then they start, massively shuffling it out the door and giving to great nieces and nephews trying to get rid of it because the IRS is going to take it. The second partnership is where the lifetime exclusion gifts go. That's really for the second and third generation. And then the third one is either a problem asset, a special asset, a family vacation compound or home that they want to keep, or non-lineal family members. So there's a number of reasons to do that third one, but this is a very typical structure at 35 mil plus. All right, so what are these people looking for? Direct investments, they want the interest aligned. They want to be sort of in the same boat that you are. They want your expertise, but they don't want to pay 5 sets of fees. So it's sort of the opposite of the Goldman model, right? They don't want you on both sides of the trade. They don't want your partner's fund shorting their deal while you're long in the fund. That doesn't sit well with them. They want to know what the fees are, how they're getting paid, and the more on the back end, more aligned with their interest, the better they like it. So they're really looking for a pure deal or as close to it as they can find. The reward is that they tend to be very long-term, very loyal. They're good partners once they're in the door. On the fund side, same thing. There's often a hurdle rate. They want to get their capital back first if possible. Again, the more the fees, the less they're being treated pari passu, the more they want in the deal. And the old retail syndication deals just aren't going to cut it for these kind of families. Now, each family is going to have sort of a pile of things that they run through, and these frameworks tend to be fairly complicated. So I've got 3 pages to kind of walk you through how they do this. So they're a lot like the institutional players in this regard. They're going to vet you. They're going to do due diligence. Like even in hiring us, there's an article in Crane, Chicago, which I don't know if you are familiar with it, but it's kind of like a little mini New York, little mini Wall Street Journal. And Cranes did a nationwide survey. They talked to 50 people, including me. This is about 10 years ago. And they asked a bunch of questions, then published the poll. They never asked me this question, but the question was, from the time you meet a family office, how long on average until you get hired? And I would have said 4 years, because that has been our experience. And I have one that took 10, one that took 8. 8 where I'm sending them monthly letters saying, need a second opinion, and if your guy can't get it on time. And I literally 8 years finally got the meeting. The answer was over 5. And this is everybody. This is investment people. This is recruiters. This is valuation firms, accounting firms, law firms, concierge services. So it's a long battle to get into this market.
Tom, can I just add a little something?
Please.
Okay, so this is where I want to talk about how I've been able to penetrate the market. And Tom's exactly right. It's been now about 5 years since we met the first time at that conference. And the first time I became, wow, there's this thing, a family office. What's that? The next time I went, I saw, wow, there's this family office thing, and it's a number of the people that are functionaries in the family office get together socially. Third year, oh, they get together socially, and then after the event, they go off campus, and that's where the family members go. Finally, 5th year, I got invited. He's a good guy. You should do deals with him. Oh, my God, you mean you're the largest shopping center owner in Puerto Rico? And that's what happened. It took 5 years.
Yeah, and it can go faster. You know, we've gotten in 30 days too, right? So 30 days to 10 years, it's all over the board. And the way you get in faster is through a trusted advisor. So if you know the CPA, the lawyer, the inside investment guy, if there's someone who can introduce you that says you're the real deal, that will greatly contract that time period. And so getting that warm, fuzzy introduction is absolutely huge because it'll just short-circuit the whole thing. People trust their friends, their colleagues, people they're co-invested with, other families. These families they're very linked together. They're hiding, but they all know each other, right? There are circles, what you call family office. Every major city has these family office circles. Cincinnati, Chicago's North Shore. There's like 7 in California. I mean bigger ones, not Tiger 21. I mean, but even those are circles as well. They're all over the place. But even bigger ones are all over the country, CTC. There's a bunch of them. And they get together and they collaborate. And basically, you can't get in there. There's no one there but the family unless you get invited. And there was one in Cincinnati. I got invited twice. I couldn't go either time. They won't call me back. I may never get invited again. I ruffled their feathers the wrong way. I had commitments. I couldn't go, and now they won't talk to me. So I may never meet those people in Cincinnati. But most of them, when you get invited in, you go, and you do your best, and hopefully something good comes out of it. And then the associations are a great route. These associations have closed conferences for members only, and they have open conferences. And so you can speak as a sponsor, you can participate just as a listener, but there's a combination of open conference. And then there are independent conference organizations that are very good in this space, some better than others, but there's about 15 conferences, and some of them are really quite good. You come away with meeting a lot of people.
Yeah, one of the things that I just ran in Miami was the first one of these kind of, I call them deal swaps, or what the families are trying to do is they're trying to do deals together. So again, if you weren't there before when I spoke, I have this card for the Katz family office. It's Mayan Properties. And so I go with the right color tag to these. I'm a family office member, and that's how I meet them. And we fund deals, and they want to participate. And we have one of the families we do business with is a multiple family office. They're based in Chicago. In fact, they're going to the one that they're throwing in March in Chicago. So these go on. They've been going on now in New York City recently, and it went from 5 or 10 people to 20 or 30 to now in New York, they have to turn people away. And I think that's the same thing you're seeing with the conference attendance. This is an idea in currency that's just like a hockey stick right now.
Yeah, these conferences are getting bigger and better and more sophisticated. There are hundreds of families at all of these conferences. And they'll come up if they have a question. You'll meet them at cocktail parties and dinners, and it's a tiptoe into the industry, and that's kind of how everybody starts. The investment piece for the families, understanding what they're doing, part of that protocol is that they don't want to blow any of their existing structures. So one, they tend to have a lot of tax-savvy investments, and then they've got estate planning-driven investments where they want the high-yield, ordinary income stuff in vehicles that are deferred or non-taxable. So example, there's a thing called an IDF, an insurance dedicated fund. It could have anything. It can have real estate, stocks, bonds, hedge funds, no limit on what could be in there. But that fund then is an eligible investor for an insurance company. So if you're not big enough to have your own private captive life insurance company, which will cost you about $3.5 billion in capital to get started, at least, maybe more. And there are 2 Midwest families, one Chicago family, one Minneapolis family, that put these in place in the 60s, and they have billions and billions of dollars in it. Let's think about what a great idea this was. Let's form our own captive life insurance company. Let's keep our own commissions. Let's buy our life insurance wholesale. Let's stuff it full of cash without violating the rules, so all of our investments grow income tax-free. And oh, by the way, we can control them through our company board. Oh, and then let's take it a step further. Oh, let me see. And we never pay income tax on that whole portfolio? Wow, that's a good thing. Let's load that thing up with high-yield investments that we would love to have grow. And oh, if it's fully qualifying insurance and not a MEC policy, we have complete liquidity. We can borrow our money out of there and never pay it back. And it gets forgiven in our estate. How good is that? And insurance, pretty easy thing to start to transfer out of the estate. So you can often get it significantly out of the estate. And just putting it in one of these family holding companies I mentioned, you're going to get a 35-40% discount if you've got other assets in there. That's a huge discount. That's a 35% 40% discount off of the estate tax, which is ranged from 40 to 55%. The generation skipping tax is the same, and for the states that have an estate tax, the most common tax is 16%. So this is a very, very compelling thing, and you can transfer gifts along the way doing the same thing. And now they got even more clever. Now we're going to form a captive reinsurance company, and we're going to have that owned by the great-grandkids. So we're going to siphon part of our life profits out of that company down to the great-grandkids. And they're going to pay tax, and there was no kiddie tax at the time. They're paying tax in 10, 15% bracket, while mom and dad are in, grandpa and grandma are in 50% brackets, plus state. So there's huge income tax arbitrage. And now that reinsurance company, it reinsures part of it. They keep part of the risk. They keep part of the profit. And what does that accomplish? No state tax, no gift tax, no generation skipping tax, and much lower income taxes. It is a massive wealth-building strategy. So then about 20 years ago, 6 New York families figured this out and tried to copy it, and that's what they did. So we call that a rent-a-captive. Instead of having your own family captive life insurance company, they joined together because they were big enough collectively. And then a number of international companies. And if you look this up, it'll tell you that the U.S. did this, and then the international companies followed. That's absolutely untrue. I don't know who wrote that stuff. It's a bunch of nonsense. The international companies did it first, and then the U.S. companies started to copy it. So they created these rent-a-captives, where you could get in for $10 million, and you could buy one of these policies. Then it came down to 5, then it came down, and now it's $250,000. You can get one of these policies for $250,000. So in effect, you can buy a private placement policy where instead of the typical commission of 10% to 120% is 50 basis points to 4%. The investment alternatives are growing and almost limitless, and they can include real estate in one of these insurance dedicated funds, and anybody with a PPLI policy can buy into your fund. And then that real estate's going to grow tax-free.
Don't give away all your secrets, like how they can get $1 billion in their IRA right now.
That'd be good, too.
Yeah, I know. We've only got a few minutes. This is, again, one of my little radio things. We only have a few minutes. He's got more presentation. Anybody have any questions that you want to ask?
Family Office Exchange, Chicago. Family Wealth Alliance, Chicago suburbs. IPI, which is Institute for Private Investors, New York and San Francisco. And then Family Office Association, that's Greenwich, Connecticut. And then Family Office Group, Family Office Club are the same organization, and they just moved to Miami just recently. Yeah. Go figure.
Yeah, the guy's terrific. I really
Don't
like
you love
the guy.
Taxpayer Flight?
I love, yeah, Taxpayer Flight. If you want to know about that, that was on our show, on my radio show last week. Anybody have any other questions? You know, like how you can access a family office to do a real estate deal? Would that be anything anybody? Yeah, you'd like that, huh, Tommy?
Well, the approach is typically to find who that decision maker is as a beginning start, and then send them basic due diligence package on the firm. Make their job easy. Give them the same sort of thing you'd give to a lawyer and accountant that's asking about the company. Here's our track record, here's what we do, here's our fit. And then I would highlight the 2 or 3 best things you have to offer and say, here's our differentiators. You don't want to go to them with your middle-of-the-road stuff. You want to say, here's our best opportunities. We're looking for a long-term player who will do this with us going forward. And then they'll just put it through the process, and you have meetings, and off you go. So it's not that complicated, but you want to let them know what your differentiators are, what's unique about it, or the expertise in a particular area, or a higher yield, or you're willing to give up more of the carry in the deal. If they bring in others, you'll let them have a GP interest. Whatever it is in the deal, that's what you want to try to accomplish. And getting to those people, those are the people that are at these conferences, frankly.
Yeah, now, I do this all the time. And the way that I do it is, if you want to see it later, I'll show you. I've got our family office card, Mayan Properties. It's the Katz Family Office. And I go to these events as a family office member. And we've done deals where other family offices can say, yeah, we did a deal with that family. Right. We made money with that family. The guy that runs that family is a terrific guy. He's a bear. You better have your interests aligned with him. And man, they beat a door to do deals with that kind of group.
Yeah. And in fact, for the real estate players that are big enough, if you beat that $10 million threshold, you should set up a virtual family office. One, because it's in your best interest, and it'll save you. If you don't save double your fee and income taxes in the first 5 years, you didn't do it right. And the estate tax savings ought to be the structure that I outlined ought to be a 35-40% savings if you mess it up. And that's after IRS audit. That's not appeal. That's not tax court. That's our result after IRS audit. And that's also the result of other firms that know what they're doing. There's a way to do this where you're not the low-hanging fruit. They don't want to fight that fight. So if it's put together right, they're really very compelling structures. And I'm eating my own cooking. There's nothing I showed you on these charts that I don't already have, including the private placement life policy, for the exact same reasons that all of you. Part of being in this industry is I'm like, what can I do for the Handler family office, in the process? And it's a shame to know all this stuff and not be big enough to use a lot of it. So I'm working hard to become my own client.
Now, I alluded to it before. It's one of my favorite stories. How does somebody get $1 billion into a 401k?
This is a beautiful thing. The key strategies to transfer wealth and accumulate it, and really these long-term wealth building strategies. One is that this insurance concept, whether it's a property and casualty captive or a life captive, and then reinsurance companies tied to it, it's just a brilliant strategy. And the PPLI is as close you can get to it without having to spend all that money. So it's become almost a retail product. We'll call it for the regular millionaires. Second is, I love these Roth IRAs. Okay, and so this is the Mitt Romney strategy, right? I know Mitt, his fundraiser is one of my best friends, longtime clients, brilliant lawyer, was a valedictorian out of Vanderbilt, a great guy. And he ran the BCG Tokyo office for a number of years. And what you do is you have this Roth IRA, and people say, well, you can't really use it because the funding limits are so low. I go, yeah, they really are. But what's a company worth that you formed, and you've created 10,000 shares, and you have it funded, and it's never done any business? What do you think it's worth? Well, it's worth the money you put into it, the cost of the organization, right? So it's got a $3,000 value because that was your legal fee. But it's actually, when you drive it out the lot, it loses half its value. So it's less than that. But you can get a valuation at nothing. So you put this stock of a fund manager, of an emerging business, of a private equity manager, the GP interested in a real estate deal, you put it in that Roth IRA when it has no value, at 1/1000th of a cent per interest. And you let it grow, tax-free, forever. And then you end up like our good friend Mitt Romney, who should have been president, with $50, $60 million in your Roth IRA. What a beautiful thing. I have a client, 18 years old, with $75 million in his Roth IRA. He cannot not be a billionaire in his lifetime. I mean, I've run the math. There's no way to lose enough money that he will not be a billionaire. And you just kind of look at it and go, wow. And this family, it's about a $500 million family. They've come to realize now that the grandson is going to be a billionaire, and no one in the history of the family has ever been a billionaire because of his Roth IRA. So even though the limits are very low, by starting the enterprise inside of that vehicle, and there are other similar strategies, that makes all the sense in the world. And similarly, when you start a new business, if you're a big family, if you're starting a business, you've got a family reputation, so you're this steel company, you keep this steel, you form Steel Company 2, owned by the grandkids and great-grandkids, and you siphon off the relationships without any really transfer of wealth or anything that's taxable, you let them start doing business. Then they acquire you for cents on the dollar after they kill your business down the road, and all that wealth's gone on to the future generations. So having your children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren start companies is really a good idea. And the Roth IRA, perhaps even better, because nothing gets taxed, not the underlying principal or the income. In the growth of a company, you're only going to pay tax on the income. But it's still the vast majority of the growth, much like real estate, until you liquidate, is outside of the tax system. So it builds a lot of wealth.
So you're all starting to realize that I'm really not the smartest guy in the room, but I might know him. So any other questions out there? Okay, we're going to, oh, yeah, Ray. Well, I got it. More questions? Anybody just, yes.
You can have UBIT issues, but you may have a carry or a piece of a fund manager that you can drop in there. And Mitt Romney did that. We've done that for hedge funds. It's all the arts and the structure. So you've got to be careful with any not-for-profit or tax-exempt enterprise not to create that's a prohibited transaction or something that's going to create some other excise tax or UBIT type tax, but it can be done.
Oh, you can't use any more acronyms, man.
Yeah, these are, I'm sorry, I try not to talk tax codes.
No more acronyms. Anybody else?